Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Georgina Manok. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm based in Providence, Rhode Island at Brown University's Square Center for Public Service. We were the administrative and research home for the classification for community engagement between 2017 and 2020. I'm currently a member of the National Advisory Committee, and I'm so excited to be here today for this great event and to celebrate Marisol and Lauren and John's leadership and stewardship of the community engagement classification under its new home in the American Council on Education. For today's format, I'll start with asking the team a few questions about what they've been up to since the 2020 cycle and the transition to ACE. We'll get some insights into the 2024 cycle and the ACE Engage platform. That's why we're here today, and the launch of this new platform. And then hopefully have some space for you all to ask us questions that you have. Marisol, Lauren, and John, let's start with a quick round of introductions in that order. Can you tell us a bit about you and specifically your involvement with the classification?
Sure. Thanks, Georgina. Hi, everyone. Good to see folks that I haven't seen in a while, and welcome. So some of you might know me from my previous role when I was the Vice President for Network Leadership at Campus Compact. In January of this year, I moved over to become the Executive Director of the Carnegie Elective Classifications and have been at the American Council on Education since April, when it sort of officially moved over to them. So just a little bit about my background. I think I first sort of heard about the classification when I was at DePaul University at the Stain Center for Community-Based Service Learning, and we were in the process of applying, but I did not have any sort of role in that process. And my executive director at the time did. So I was familiar with it, but sort of didn't know. When I moved over to the University of La Verne, that was something that was in the job description, something that our president really was interested in the university attaining. And so I was responsible for that initiative when I was at La Verne and the application for the 2015. I did that within the context of moving to a new city and state and getting to know the local community, and had to sort of lead the effort for the application within kind of 6 months of moving to La Verne. And so it was a crash course that the elective classification gave me the opportunity to sort of engage in, and a really important self-study. After that, I stayed connected to the Carnegie Community Engagement Classification by serving on the National Advisory Committee, and then moving into this role this year. And for the 2020 cycle, I helped serve as a reviewer. So I've kind of seen it from different angles, which is kind of what I bring to this role as executive director.
Thanks, Marisol. Lauren?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Barchi. I'm the Associate Director of the Carnegie Elective Classifications here at ACE. I've been 1 year working with the Carnegie classification work, which is very exciting. And prior to that, I was at the University of South Florida, where I deep back end supported some data on their Carnegie classification application process, but I wasn't really deeply involved, similar to Marisol when she was at DePaul. So I'm really excited to be part of this work, and I'm working on its expansion of new elective classifications, which you might hint on later on during this call, and going from there. So I'll pass things over to John.
Great, thanks, Lauren. Yeah, it's great to see a lot of friends on this call. So it's good to see you. I hope your semester's off to a good start. I'm John Saltmarsh. I currently serve as a visiting fellow at the Carnegie Foundation. And in that capacity, I'm staff for the Community Engagement Classification. So I have the pleasure of working with Marisol and Lauren. We're sort of the core staff for the Community Engagement Classification. And I try to help them think about the larger elective classifications as we go beyond the community engagement, but that's for another webinar. I also had the pleasure of working with Georgina at Brown when we were working on the Carnegie classification. So this is a great opportunity for all of us to get together and look forward to this conversation. So back to you, Georgina.
Thank you, John, and happy anniversary, Lauren. You survived the first year. So for folks who may not be familiar, can you tell us a bit more about the American Council on Education and what is significant about it being the new home for the elective classifications?
Sure. Thanks for the question. So ACE is a membership organization based in DC that mobilizes the higher education community to shape public policy and foster innovative, high quality practice. As a membership organization, we have more than 1,700 colleges and universities that are members. And in addition, like previously, I only knew ACE through the ACE Fellows Program, which does leadership development for folks interested in becoming presidents and provosts, but there's a lot of other kinds of programming that ACE does, and there's a lot of influence that ACE has, particularly on the higher ed policy work in DC. So it's been great for us to get to know a little bit more about the program, and I think that moving over to ACE and its kind of broader higher education role and position provides us the opportunity to reach out to institutions that, like previously, the classification maybe could not have done, and also raise awareness across the broader higher ed landscape and policy landscape about the Carnegie elective classifications. In addition to that, I'd say that part of the move and part of the reason why the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching chose ACE was because they were really interested in bringing sort of both sides of the house together, the basic and universal side, right, as well as the elective side. And ACE provides us the platform to be able to do that. John, would you add anything?
Yeah, I just think that's sort of the biggest shift here. You might remember the basic or universal was at Indiana University. The community engagement classification has been at multiple homes, and here was the opportunity to bring them all together, which is really also an exciting time for all of the classifications. I think the work that we've been doing on the community engagement classification can inform the developments on the basic. There's work on the basic side to create some kind of a classification around social mobility. Again, we have the opportunity to inform that and then to learn from both of those other classifications. So it's kind of this great opportunity that we just never have had before. So yeah, I think it holds great promise.
Thank you both. So from my experience with the 2020 cycle, we heard so much from folks, how much they were craving kind of a space where they can talk to others who are also applying or who are also preparing or who are also dealing with that hard question or trying to figure out how to do things. And also we answered so many questions that others would have benefited from. We tried to keep the FAQ section updated. So I'm really, really excited to see that ACE Engage is being launched today. So can you tell us what it is and how it will be used to support campuses that are applying for or learning about the community engagement classification?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the other sort of benefits about being at ACE is that they also just have a lot of stuff. And so we walked into this organization, they already had this platform called ACE Engage. And what a perfect name, especially for our work. But it's this online forum that allows, kind of similar to sort of Facebook, maybe LinkedIn, that allows for online connection to happen. And they use this with other programs of ours, other ACE programs utilize ACE Engage. And we thought, what a great way to foster that connection and provide that support for folks who are interested in applying for the classification, either this cycle or the next. And also, I think, one of the things I had really wished for after I did the 2015 application, that it would have been more, or that there would have been more than just sort of the sticker that, we were successful, but that there would be some additional connection in between cycles. And so our hope is really to provide that space through ACE Engage for that connection, for the asking of questions. Hey, what are folks doing about this? I know I belong to some online groups on Facebook that people do utilize that space for, but I think being able to create this dedicated space specifically for the community engagement elective will hold a lot of promise. And for us as sort of the administrators and stewards of this, it helps us think about like what's coming up for our campuses and the ways that we can continue to support, adjust, and provide additional resources for the folks that are doing the work and creating the application. Because we know that it's not an easy process, that it's pretty intensive and extensive, and we want to be able to make sure that folks have the support that they need to feel successful, and then also really benefit from the self-study that this provides for our institutions.
Thank you, Marisol. Anyone else want to share anything before we jump to actually looking at it?
Yeah, we're really excited about this.
All right, so without further ado, Lauren, can you share your screen and walk us through the platform, please?
Yeah, this is ACE Engage. So I think many of you are currently on ACE Engage. We sent some invites out. I'll throw a link in the chat later so you can join directly. But this is what ACE Engage looks like. So as Marisol mentioned, it kind of looks like a hybrid social media and like learning management system platform. So when you kind of check in or you're in our program, they call it, you have an activity feed, which will kind of automatically populate onto. Here you'll find the latest events. You'll have discussion questions you can respond to. You can like things here, and then you can connect with members. Some of the main features that we plan to do through ACE Engage include weekly discussion posts, kind of like this one I populated here to introduce yourself. You can add comments, you can add features and subfields to those things. You can add comments onto comments. We also plan to host frequent events. So you can kind of see here on this top of this feed, an event is kind of highlighted because I added it to the main feed. But on the left-hand corner, there's an events tab. When you click on that, it'll show you all the events that we're planning. And we'll continually be adding these over the next few weeks and months. We plan to host bi-weekly open Q&A sessions where you can drop in, ask questions about the process, listen in to see what people are talking about, and kind of connect with people who are currently working on or preparing for the application process. We'll also host monthly webinars. So we have one coming up on the 28th of this month about tenure promotion. So I'll go ahead and click on that one to show you what those events look like. When you click on one, you get the description of what the event's about, and then the Zoom meeting link. You can add it to your calendar. You can get a direct link, and it kind of will integrate with typical like Outlook and Google Calendars, which is a pretty nice feature. Or you can log right back into ACE Engage and click on the link to join, which is pretty great too. And it sends you reminders as well to let you know that events are happening. So it's a great place to kind of see what we're up to. We keep things on our website as well, but this is a nice centralized location to what's coming your way. In addition to events and to connectivity feed that will showcase some discussion questions to keep people engaged. We also have a document repository under the document section here on the left. So you can see some preview of what may be coming. We're going to populate things over time. But when you check in right now, you'll be able to see that we have a document here about APLU's IEP process and how that kind of corresponds with or can be compared to the Carnegie Community Engagement Classification. When you click on that, it has a link. And so any of these little documents will direct link you to resources. And like I mentioned, we'll be adding them over time. The benefit of this being acting like a social media kind of platform is that you can also post things on here. It's also just as much yours as it is coming from our side as administrators. So anytime you have questions and want the hive mind of people who are thinking about the Carnegie Community Engagement process to answer your question, share what's on your mind, and I'm sure a whole bunch of folks will be really excited to dive in and answer your questions. There's also, I should mention, a little chat feature where you can direct message or group message people who are in your group, in this group together. If you want to connect, you can connect offline and exchange information. So it's a pretty nice feature. Again, we'll kind of populate with that, how to join here at the end of this call if you've not joined already. And we're excited to have you all on board.
I think if I can just add, one of the things as we came on to this work, that we really wanted to happen was for the classification to feel like it is of and by the field. And so this platform allows us to really create that space to kind of listen and see what's happening in real time, and for us to share that and be able to provide resources around that. And so our hope is that we'll continue to sort of move efforts to make this of and by the field. I think this is one way. Our new review process, which we can talk about a little later, is another way that we seek to do that.
That is awesome. So anyone, regardless of whether they're applying right now, can join. You don't need to be like in active application mode, and just join the conversation. So yeah, go ahead.
No, absolutely. We know that a lot of campuses are, because of the switch that we've made in terms of folks who received designation in 2015, have the ability to either apply in 24 or 26. And we see a lot of folks saying, we're going to apply in 26, but we want to kind of start the process now. So this space is for all those applying now or in the future, especially as we're sort of moving towards any edits for the 26 version.
Great. Marisol, while I have you, can you share your vision for the platform and how it can help build community?
Yeah, I mean, I think I spoke a little bit about this, but, really the ability for us to make this of and by the field, something that benefits our campuses. We know sort of anecdotally, right, from the conversations, from the experiences, we also know it's a lot of work, right? And so we want to prepare campuses to be successful. And we do that by providing the capacity building support. And this platform allows us to do that along with, the in-person virtual workshops that we're going to be providing. We learn a lot from all of those spaces. And so this will be another space for us to learn about in real time. I think also, our vision for the classification is inclusive. And so we want to make sure that we have diversity in terms of the kinds of institutions that apply. So we're making really concerted efforts towards recruiting community colleges, HBCUs, HSIs, and other minority serving institutions to apply for the classification, to learn from the breadth of knowledge that we gain and the data that we gather. So we also want to encourage educational researchers to utilize the data that we have from the classifications. And I think this platform will also help create natural connections for people in the field around opportunities for research and other collaboration. So we're really excited about what we can do with this. I think the sky's the limit, and the field has been wanting spaces to connect. We all can't make it to conferences and have those, special moments or house parties, but we can use this platform as a way to connect.
Thank you, Marisol. John, you've been part of almost every classification cycle so far. So the Carnegie Elective Classifications were piloted for the first time in 2006. Why do you think this is the right time to be launching this kind of online platform?
That's a really good question. But I think for me, what it represents is, at this point in time, we've had hundreds of campuses participate in the classification. We also know that since we started this in 2006, that lots changed in the field. And so I think about sort of all the knowledge and experience that's out there represented in this meeting, right? And how can we bring all of that knowledge and experience together and learn from each other? And all of that lines up very consistently with the work at the foundation and what they refer to as improvement science. And part of that is around what they call networked learning communities, right? We would probably call them communities of practice, right? But that's where the knowledge lies, and that's where the field is changing. And so the other thing I think about is this is the first time that we will have had campuses coming back to reclassify for the second time. So it'll be their third time around. That's a big deal, right? That means really long-term commitment to this. What does that mean in terms of institutionalization? And what can we all learn from that? So it's just this great opportunity, right? And being at ACE, as Marisol said earlier, we have the capacity now to do this. So it's just this, I think, great synergy. It's right at the right time.
Thanks, John. So both you and Marisol have advised institutions and worked on applications for the classification. Can you talk a bit more about why it's still relevant and why institutions, in spite of our competing resource constraints, should consider applying for the designation?
Because it's all about doing our work better, right? Whenever we do workshops on the classification, we say this is not about getting the classification. This is about improving the community engagement work that you do on your campus, and the application can actually help you do that. What it allows you to do, it gives you the opportunity or excuse to do a self-study. And that self-study is to learn how to do what you're doing better, figure out what you're doing and where you are and how you want to do it better, right? And if you provide the evidence that leads to classification, that's great. And if not, you'll get feedback and you can come back again in another classification. So that's the way that I always think about it. It's always about how do we do the work better? How do we push the field? And how do we change our institutions? Because that, again, is what the classification is about. What else, Marisol?
Yeah, I like to say that the process is the prize, right? It's not just, again, the sticker that you receive and the congratulations and the bragging rights, but it is actually the process itself. So, if you're a decentralized campus, it gives you an excuse to find out what's happening across campus. If you're a centralized campus, which I haven't actually heard of many examples, we're all always talking about our institutions being silos. So, it gives you also an excuse to kind of reach out to students, to community partners, to review your own practice, and then do that against the backdrop of questions that push you to do better, right? To think more about reciprocity or equity, to think about the ways that we're integrating this into the core academic work of the institution, or the ways that this shows up for faculty and staff and tenure and promotion, the ways that we sort of become creative in the opportunities that we provide non-traditional students to do community engagement, because we know of its importance, but also the realities that our students face, especially during these times. I think, it also gives us the opportunities to sort of take advantage of the moment. There was a lot of learning that we had to do, a lot of adaptation, flexibility, and agility that our community engagement offices and our institutions had to sort of do because of COVID, right? So one, we know it's possible. Two, that the stories that came out about the ways institutions were responsive to the needs at the time, I think are great learning opportunities for us to move this work forward. And lastly, I think in this time where we see kind of what's happening with our nation in terms of sort of faltering democracy, challenges that we have around diversity and equity, or even the spaces to discuss those, what role can our work play in helping to drive the conversation and the agenda within our higher ed institutions and within our communities, right? How can we be adaptive, but also help our institutions adapt to the moment? So, yeah.
So will there be an opportunity to discuss that formally in the new application, kind of the COVID impacts, like what is happening? Some of us maybe just survived and that's enough for a prize. How are you factoring that into the process? And maybe if you can tell us a bit about the review process this time around, Marisol.
Sure. I'm going to ask Lauren to talk about the question that we have currently in this one, and then I'll talk a little bit about the review process, as well as some things that we're thinking about right now for 26.
And the first section of the application is about communities and our campuses and our contexts. So the question about what does your campus look like? What are students like, faculty like, and what does that mean? What do your communities look like and where the engagement happens? We also include a question about how kind of current events have impacted your campus, your communities, and your practice, whether that be COVID, climate change, racial justice movements, and other kinds of attacks on our democracy might have impacted your practices and both positively and negatively. Showcase the reality of what our spaces look like. Some campuses, like you mentioned, barely survived and are hanging on, and you can kind of explain what that looks like. Some took the opportunity to be nimble and change the course and came up with some really innovative and new opportunities for their students, faculty, and staff, and their communities in partnership. So the questions are there, and we encourage you to kind of use that, that space throughout the application to explain what this looks like. And then part of the data for this application, instead of being 1 year, you can, the 2024 cycle, which is right now, you can pull through data from the pre-COVID year. So the, which is 2018-19, which is a long while ago, it feels like, all the way through this, this kind of past academic year, to kind of mix and match stories and examples that make the most sense. So if you feel like what represents your campus well might be pre-COVID, that's great. Post-COVID or still COVID, that's great, or a mix of between.
Right. Thanks. And I would say so I'm going to tackle some of the 26 things that we're talking about. One of the things that we also notice is that we're not as explicit, particularly in regards to sort of the civic work, right? The democratic work that we're doing on our campuses. And so we've been talking about the ways to integrate that more directly, ask more direct questions about that and how that shows up on our campuses as part of the broader community engagement work. So we don't have any specific questions developed as of right now. So if you have any ideas, we would love to hear them. But we do want to be more conscious about the way the civic work shows up within the broader public purpose focus of the elective classifications. In addition to that, we're looking at some of the additional questions that we've added given sort of the timing. So we don't know kind of what's going to happen. We'll make some decisions around how much COVID is a part of the next round, sort of as we sort of move through and see what the fall looks like for us, and what the uptick is in some of the other kind of broader world and national issues that we're facing. But I think just as campuses had to be adaptive to the moment, so does the application, and so we'll work towards doing that. We also want to make sure that within the context of the application, that the diversity of institutions that we have see themselves represented in the institutions. So more examples that are relevant to community colleges or medical colleges or special focused institutions, right? That may have different tenure and promotion policies or, community partners. And so we want to make sure that every institution sees themselves within the context of the application. The next piece that we're really excited about is the review process. So what we will be doing for this round of applications as a pilot, and then hopefully moving forward, which is our goal, is creating a peer review process for the Carnegie applications. So some of you may have noticed that we have a kind of notification date of October 31st. It's a purchase application by, even though the application itself is due May 1st. And part of that is because we need to know how many applications we're going to have that need to be reviewed in order to recruit the reviewers. So we're going to do a broad call for reviewers from across the field and for our colleagues joining us from Australia who have just launched their own Carnegie Community Engagement Elective Classification, and Canada, who are soon to launch their community engagement elective classifications, to also join us in the review process, as well as our as folks across the country who are scholars and practitioners in this field. So we'll be doing a call out for reviewers probably in December, January, working towards the training of folks to review, and then moving towards review teams in the summer. And our hope is to have 3 sets of eyes at least on every application. We're going to create review teams. They will review probably 7 to 10 applications If they come to consensus, great. If they do not, we'll have a senior review committee who will do that. And our team will have a set of eyes on each application as well. And so we're really excited about this. This gives us an opportunity to create a lot of learning across the field by participating in the review process. And I think, again, it helps meet our goal of the Carnegie Community Engagement Elective being of and by the field.
Thank you, Marisol. So we've heard a bit about kind of the targeted outreach to expand institutional types that are applying and joining the process of the classification. Can you tell us a bit more about that, what those efforts look like?
Sure. So when we came in, we sort of did an analysis of the kinds of institutions that applied and then were successful at receiving and who, currently have the designation. And we were a lot disappointed in terms of the numbers, particularly for HBCUs, community colleges, and HSIs. Both their participation rate in the application process as well as their success rate were very low. And if we really want to be a classification that represents the diversity of our higher ed institutions, then we needed to do something about that. So we're doing some targeted outreach. We had a meeting with some of the HBCUs that have applied in the past, ones that expressed interest, and we're working with them to create broader awareness within the HBCU community about the community engagement elective and our broader, electives that we currently have, like our leadership for public purpose and the ones that we will be developing. And we're doing some work with community colleges. So we are working on being able to offer training at the end of October for community colleges around the classification. So get on the platform because you'll see all of our events there. As well as increasing the number of HSIs. HSIs we know are kind of a moving target at some point because we have some emerging HSIs and some that are already established, but we do want to increase the participation rate of all of those institutions. And on our part, it starts with creating more opportunities for additional capacity building and support for those institutions. And on the other side of it, I think, we have a national advisory committee, and we've been looking at the types of institutions or fields or organizations that those members represent. And so we also want to make sure that we have adequate representation. So we've added an additional person to our National Advisory Committee who represents community colleges. We've added someone who represents HBCUs, and we'll continue to diversify our National Advisory Committee. So we also make sure that the folks who are on the NAC, as we call it, come from a variety of institutions and reflects the kind of diversity and equity efforts that we're committed to as well.
Thank you, Marisol. So you mentioned the leadership classification. Can you tell us a little more about what the other classifications look like, or if anyone else?
Yeah, let me throw that one over to Lauren.
Great.
So we're very excited that the community engagement classification has been around for 17 years, but this past spring, we just launched the elective classification and leadership for public purpose. And it is in partnership with our friends at Rice University. They are the administrative home in partnership with us here at ACE. They also have a platform similar to AC Engage called Higher Led. I'll toss that link in the chat here in a minute too. So, and you can find information about that elective classification on our website. Their application launched this April. It's going to have a long application phase and not be due until December of 2023. But it's a similar framework to the community engagement classification in terms of thinking about how this is in leadership or public purpose is embedded in our curricular and co-curricular spaces, into faculty, research, scholarship, and teaching and learning, and ways that embeds in other systems throughout our institutions. We are going to be expanding elective classifications in the future. We are currently in the brainstorming phase of what that's going to look like. And we plan to hopefully announce and roll out some new ideas as we kind of move towards our 20th anniversary of the community engaged classification in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wish we would have started earlier because I would have thrown a quinceañera instead of having to wait till, you know, the 20th anniversary, but we'll have a big party too.
Great. So folks, now it's your turn. Do you have questions for the team? So two options. You can either use the raise hand feature or use your physical hand. I'll go through the pages, or drop your question in the chat, and we will answer it. Oh, look at that. Only the first page has your cameras on, making my life easier. Great. So any questions that you have about anything that we shared today, or anything else that's on your mind, or a super teeny tiny question from the classification itself, whatever comes to mind. People's favorite ice creams, whatever you want to know on the team. All right, we have one from Julie. Can you say more about the years that can be used for the 2026 classification? So this is a question about the data, Lauren, that you had just kind of talked a little bit about. Can we use multiple years?
I was looking up our exact years. So because we have it in the FAQ section, so I want to make sure we are consistent with what years we're using. So the 2026 cycle should use data from academic year 2022, 2023. With the caveat that we don't know what's happening. So right now we're saying 1 year only, but as things progress, things change, that might be, the rule might shift to expand the number of years. As you might know, right, the application's open January 24 through April of 25, which means you might have data from academic year 2023 to 2024. You can use that data if you've had time to assess and understand it. Understand that campus might not have the chance to think about its outcomes and impacts and understand the value of what they're knowing and learning or using. So we say 22, 23 with the understanding you have the time to really do assessments. Does that hopefully help clarify things? Yeah, excellent.
The other piece I want to share, we can do this a little bit later, is the resources that we have. And when we share our website, we'll do that. So if we're reapplying for the classification, can we use data from the 10-year period? No. You can sort of share links to websites, but reviewers are not looking at previous applications. So, you know, if say on your website, you talk about what's happened over the course, like in the sense of that you can share, but you're not sharing sort of data. You are talking about where the evolution has come and maybe some of the changes that you've seen, but you're not necessarily sharing the data in the same way within the context of the application. John, anything else to add?
No, I don't have anything to add. I just want to go back to, I think, the earlier question, which was around multiple years of data. The way I understood that was if we have data from a particular year for some questions and data for other years for others, can we do that? And the answer is yes. What we want to know, though, is, and make it really clear in the application, for any data you share, when it's coming from, like, so the reviewers know what they're looking at, right? And if you have really recent data that you've been able to look at and that you can share, by all means, use that data. Just make sure you tell us when it comes from. And the other thing, which I think is really important, if you want to use data pre-COVID, that we're saying absolutely do that, because we know that COVID has largely impacted, has heavily impacted all of our educational services, our classrooms, and particularly if we think about engagement and learning. Our NESE data, if you look at the NESE reports from the last couple of years, are terrible because students have disengaged from learning. And part of that engaged learning is often community-based learning. And so we don't expect those numbers to be really high, but we also don't want you to feel like you're bound to that data. So if you say, no, we really want to use the data that's pre-COVID because that's a better representation of the kind of engagement we were doing, then by all means do that.
Thanks, John. So Brittany, just to clarify, for the first time application, we don't want the folks to use links, but for reclassification, you can use links.
So there's a question I want to make sure we don't skip over. Is there a benefit of applying in 24 instead of 26?
You already know what the questions are. You don't know what they will be. You know, what I often tell campuses is that if you felt like your institution did some amazing work and, you know, was very responsive to the community, right? Even if your numbers may be lower and whatever, and you feel like you have a solid team, then, you know, it would be worth applying in 24. The context setting that you provide within the application is going to be really important, right? Explaining to the reviewers like what the situation was like in your community, your campus, and the responsiveness. And so I think that there's going to be deeper understanding, right, of the impact that this has had. We can't say what's going to sort of come in 26. We're trying to make those determinations early so folks know, but I would say that's the benefit. The other piece I would also say is that what we're hearing from a lot of campuses is there's a lot of turnover, and so there's the staff that may have been, particularly for reclassification, there during the last one are no longer there. So it's a benefit for them to wait a little bit as they establish their teams. But if you do feel like you have a solid team, some of which were there, others may not be there, then, you know, go ahead with 24. In addition to that, if you also feel like your leadership has been solid, right? Presidents, provosts, deans, those, then, you know, maybe 24 is a good time to apply, particularly because we're also seeing a lot of turnover with presidents and provosts at institutions, and we don't know what kind of impact that will kind of have later. And if your institution is undergoing a strategic plan, this might fit in really nicely with what's already happening.
Thank you, Marisol. Lindsay, thank you for accepting my invitation for a very specific question. This is one that we got in the chat. So section 9, question 13, describe the ways in which the tenure and promotion process and the staff reward process accounts for the often racialized nature of community engagement that disproportionately impacts faculty, staff, students, and communities of color. Do you have any examples of what that might look like?
In terms of examples of what that can look like, the clearest example for me is where campuses actually are disaggregating data around faculty who are promoted and up for promotion as a way of understanding not only what scholarship is being advanced, but who's doing the scholarship. So that's one thing that campuses are beginning to look more closely at. In terms of how else that can look like, I'm thinking that we're going to actually learn that from the applications. I think more and more campuses are paying attention to the racialized nature of all sorts of systems on their campus. But if there's one system in particular that impacts higher education, it's the promotion and tenure system. So we thought it was really important to ask this question. And the other thing I would just say about a question like this, and you'll see new questions appear periodically, there's never a major change in the application, but tweaks which represent changes in the field. Part of it is what the foundation really thinks should be happening on campuses to institutionalize community engagement, and part of it is what they don't really think is happening but should be happening. So signaling to the field, if you aren't paying attention to this, you really should be. I think this is one of those questions, right? So for some campuses, we will actually get good evidence, and for a lot of them, we won't. But at the same time, those same campuses will at least have this on their radar, that this is something they should pay attention to. I'll give you just one example of kind of how that works. This was probably back in like 2008. And it was around the promotion and tenure questions. And in 2006, promotion and tenure was an optional question. And because of the advice from the National Advisory Council, it shifted from being optional to being one of the foundational questions. Because the advisory committee says we know enough from research now that this is absolutely central to understanding how the culture shifts at an institution and how you institutionalize community engagement. Can't be an optional question. But the power of Carnegie asking the question is what happens. And I was at a workshop, and there were a group of faculty in a corner sort of working among themselves as part of the workshop. And I overheard them saying, they said, we need to change our promotion and tenure guidelines because Carnegie says we have to. Right? But if you think about that, like Carnegie has no power over this whatsoever. Right? But what Carnegie was saying is you need to pay attention to this. This is really important. And that's what they were doing. Right? And so in terms of the racialized nature of the systems we have on our campus, we need to be paying attention to that. And that's what the foundation wants to have happen.
Yeah. And I think if you're not currently collecting that data, you might be able to go back and see where you can pull that, right? So it might not be sort of what's top of mind or data that's currently being pulled, but that doesn't mean that that information is not out there. And then as you're preparing the application, you can't go back and kind of search for it in that way. And again, that will tell us, you know, where the field is going and what kind of considerations to continue to have as you are building your work moving forward.
Another question, the 2024 reclassification document uses prompts such as describe and provide an example. What is the expected balance of narrative and data or numbers supporting the narrative as folks approach answering these questions?
I can start, and John, if you want to take up afterwards. I would say, you know, we've intentionally made, particularly this cycle, much more narrative based, right? We want to know the stories. We want to know the examples. We want to hear what's happening, particularly across campus. So both depth and breadth. And so while there is some bean counting that we do, right, and that we ask, those kind of fields are not as prevalent as they were maybe in the 2015 application. But how do you use those narrative prompts to both tell that story and share the numbers, right? Particularly for the reviewers. And we also know that impact is not just showing increase in growth, but also depth of relationships. You know, impact is also measured in more than just the numbers. And so how do your examples show that, right? As well as looking at how the numbers sort of match up across, right? Where the impact is happening, is there correlation between the numbers you put in one section and what you put in the narrative? Because that's also something that the reviewers will be looking at. Do the numbers add up and make sense?
Yeah, I think that's just right. And it depends really on the questions, whether they're calling for qualitative or quantitative data, right? And so, you know, it depends on what you're collecting. And, you know, community partner survey is probably not going to be quantitative because you're really looking for that kind of qualitative data. And so you're not going to have numbers there. But when you specifically ask about the numbers of courses, we're not asking you to kind of describe, you know, in a narration about that. We want numbers. So it depends on the question, and we're not looking for any particular balance. It's what kind of data are you collecting, and then asking you to share that with us.
Thanks, John. Let's all take a very deep breath. Tamara, we're here with you. It's going to be okay. Can we go back to something you already answered? But please confirm that a 2026 recertification is to be based on academic year 22-23, not academic year 23-24.
So let me just say, you can use both, if you have already been able to analyze and look at that data, right? So we say 22, 24 because, or 22, 23, because we know you would have already had, or hope that you would have already had a chance to look at that data. But if you want to use 23, 24, you can, if you have had a chance to really explore that data, because of when the application opens up, and we can share that the 2026 cycle with you. So it's all okay. It's all okay. But if you feel you have access to it, go ahead. I imagine it's going to be the same as we did with this round, where you will just have to indicate within the question which year you're using, right? So it's clear for the reviewers. Lauren, do you want to share the website and our deadlines for both?
Yes, great time for us to kind of jump in for a couple of important closing reminders. So I'm going to share my screen again really quickly, maybe. Alrighty. So, okay, so just a reminder, we have 2 elective classifications. We've been talking about community engagement today. We have the new one, Leadership Public Purpose. It's on our website. It's very exciting. Take a look if you're interested in diving in. This is our current timeline of the current 2024 classification. It's open, it's live. The purchase deadline is October 31st, 2022. You can find the link to Give Pulse on our website. It's not due though until May 1st, 2023. And you'll hear from us December with a live announcement in January 24. I think I have the next one on here. Oh, I didn't put it on there. Shoot. All right, I'll show it in a second on our website. Again, reminder, by October 31st. This helps us understand how many applications are going to be out there, so we find the appropriate number of reviewers. We've been through this a number of times today, so I'll skip over this. Upcoming events, right? And you'll find them on AC Engage, but the next one that's coming up next week, we're hosting our first open Q&A. Come by like today and just ask away questions. We'll try to answer them the best that we can. We'll record these and post them on our website. So if you miss it and you want to check in later on, it's going to be there. We're having a really big first webinar on tenure and promotion policies on September 28th. Please come. We're really excited about it. We have an awesome research team from UCLA, University of Michigan. We're going to share some data research they did from the 2020 classification cycle and share a bunch of really cool things with you all about that. And we're some other things are to come, but we'll be posting them as they come through. Alrighty, and we mentioned peer review process. The call for reviewers will be November 14th to December 14th. You'll get official information coming in your inboxes over the next couple of weeks. We'll send up kind of a save the date here coming soon so you don't miss it. You can mark on your calendars because we really want to have you all at the table reviewing with us and learning from this process and sharing your great wisdom with our review process team. All right, and this is our website. I threw it in the chat. And then I'm going to show you really quick our next timeline because it's really nice and easier to see when it's visually on here. So bear with me for just 1 second. This is our website, carnegieelectiveclassifications.org. It's a wealth of information. If you can't find something, shoot me an email because I can help you find it or add it because it's really important. If you need it, we can put it on here. One thing is our FAQ page. Anytime you ask questions, I try to post them on here and put a response. You can go back and find it. It's kind of semi-searchable by search and find. The big thing on here is the main page has a really cool map of classified institutions now. This was added last week by our awesome media and marketing team here at ACE. You can actually click on each institution when they were classified, when they're up for classification. It's a really great feature. Hopefully you too will be added on this map if you're not already. And we have this nice timeline, 2026. We've decided on the dates. You will hear from us with the new application on January 26, 2024, shortly after we announce the current 2024 cycle designation. We'll have a deadline to purchase by November 4th of 2024. April 1st, 2025 will be the application deadline, with the same decision timeline of December internal embargoed notifications and the January 26th designation announcement. It's on our website now. You can check back and find it. It's public knowledge now. So it's a really exciting process. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Lauren. Can
sorry,
we
one
squeeze in
thing-
2 more questions? Go ahead, Marisol.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just want to also, Lauren, on the screen, we also, for this cycle, trained a group of consultants. And so if institutions are interested in utilizing consultants, there are a group of folks that we trained that your institution can work on hiring. You make those arrangements specifically with the consultants. We're not responsible for that. We just have them listed as a resource for the field, because we know many institutions contract consultants to help them with the process. So in relation to Brian's question about the cost, it really depends on our end. It's only the application fee. It depends on what the institution sort of wants to provide in terms of the internal team or any external consultants that they might be interested in hiring.
You can find the consultants on here on the top right-hand corner. There's a little page here, and then there's a page for the community engagement consultants. And you'll find their lovely bios here. Some of them are on the
Contact information.
Yeah, and contact information. So, yeah.
Thank you both. Alan, did you want to share anything? You're muted.
I am. There we go.
There you go.
Thanks so much, Georgina. And thanks, Marisol, for pointing out that I shaved my beard. I appreciate that. Many of you know about the International Association for Research on Service Learning and Community Engagement. Many of you are participants. Just wanted to draw your attention to the practitioner scholar community, which many of you may be interested in participating in. Applications due this Friday. I'm dropping the link in the chat. And I just wanted to say that as the incoming editor for the journal for the International Association, I'm working with Patrick Green, who runs this program, to offer mentoring and editorial support to anybody in the practitioners scholar community who would like to take a piece of writing and submit it, a piece of research for publication in the journal, which will have a special section on that topic next year.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks so much. So you mentioned the use of external or peer reviewers. Do we, the institution, have an opportunity to weigh in on that process? And then there's a quick question around cost. Are there other costs that you know exist beyond the cost of the application itself?
Yeah, I answered that with regards to the consultants. I want to understand more what you mean by do institutions have input on the process? I mean, I think what we're hoping to do, especially since this is our pilot, is group institution types and have people with at least some experience in particular kinds of institutions, like, you know, have folks who have worked at community colleges or part of community colleges review others, or so that there's that base of knowledge with at least with one reviewer within the team. But happy to answer any questions also offline. So I will throw my email in here.
That is exactly what I was hoping for. It's more aligned, like when you think about for our accreditation, for example, you have the opportunity to not specifically select an individual, but you might have the opportunity to say, these are the 8 institutions that are like mine that I either want to learn more from, right? Because that's the whole, one of the main reasons in going through these type of processes, right, is to learn from others. So having that opportunity. But if you're, but thinking along those, like type of institution, size, program, academic program mix, things like that.
Yeah, we're planning on taking a lot of those things into consideration. Again, so this time is going to be our first time, so we're anticipating fewer applications this round, so it's a good time to pilot this and see what that would look like. But yes, that is our intention.
And thank you, Laura Lee, for the update on the data to use and thinking through, like, especially for if you're reclassifying, using comparative trends will also be helpful as you're inputting data points. Thank you all again for Good. Marisol, did you want to share anything?
Yes,
Okay,
really
yeah, go for
quickly,
it.
there was
Yep.
one question about the civic engagement one. So we'll probably ask, like, is there some context for your state around this? We'll probably ask things about like the Constitution Day and what your institution does, especially because that's required by, we might ask what your NSOLV numbers are if you have them. We're not completely sure, but would welcome any feedback or input from the field. So feel free to reach out to us, and we'll probably be doing some calls for dialogue around these specific areas.
Great. Thank you, Marisol. And thank you all again for all the amazing work you've already done and